Hi guys! In this series of Node.js from zero to hero, we're going to demonstrate on how to use session in making a request. So now, without any further ado, let's get started. To start with, uh, what is a session? Session is a term used to refer a visitor's time browsing a website. It is meant to represent the time between a visitor's first arrival at a page on a site and the time they stop using the site. For better understanding, we'll be going to demonstrate on how to apply session using Node.js. For this session, I'll be using express-session. Also, I'll be using MySQL as our database logs, or this will store our session whenever we do some visits to a certain website. So let's start. For this demo, I'll be using this database. So to begin with, by the way, I'm using exam. So on your part, you can use any database as long there's a MySQL on that part. Okay, so let's proceed. To begin with, I'm going to create a new folder. And let's call this as session project. Please take note, I'll be using VS Code. On your part, you can use any IDE. As long there's a Node.js, then that should work. For a good start, whenever we create a new project, always starts with the npm init. For those who have missed my previous lesson, please check on the previous lesson, which is the MVC. Same goes, but for this here, we're going to demonstrate only the basic concept of session. Okay, so let's start. So let's start first with npm. Oops. Seems my piece is a little slower. Let's raise that. Okay, so let's start with npm init and hit enter. Okay, for the name of this package, I'll be using this name, version as is, description, session using Node.js. For entry point, I'll be using server.js. That's command. You can skip that for now. Same goes. Yours truly. Then, if you're satisfied with your setup, then hit enter. Cool. Okay, so the package that we're going to use, I'm going to move this one. Okay, for the package, we'll be needing, of course, the express. Also, we'll be needing MySQL and express session. Also, for this demo, I'll be using express express MySQL session. And we need to save that. Okay. Now, for those who are using MySQL, this demonstration explain using MySQL database as the temporary storage of our session. But some part here will be applied to different database. But since we're using Express MySQL session, these are good features that will store your session, of course. Again, for those who are first time hearing this session is like I said a while ago. Let's say if you're logging on let's say a Facebook account. So once you log in, the information is stored or the credentials is yours. Is your time. I mean the time that you are spending on that website. So the time in there demonstrate is this session. So once you dismiss or log out, so session will of course the same time it will disconnect. So that's the features that we're going to demonstrate in this section here. Okay, so I guess we're already done. Let's clear that. Now let's check or examine our package.json. Okay. As of the time of this recording, our Express is version 4.17.1, and our Express MySQL session is 2.1.6. Express session is 1.17.2, and MySQL 2.18.1. Okay, cool. So a while ago, I prepared an entry point, so I'm going to create that. That is our server.js. Okay. Now for this demonstration, we're going to load up our package. So to do that, we need to type on cons express equals to require express. That should be cons. Next, I'll be loading up our MySQL. Next, we'll be loading as well our session. Or should I say express-session. Okay, cool. Now the last one, I'm going to load our Express MySQL session. So for that, I'm going to store that in a variable called MySQL store. Of course, we need to load that. Express -MySQL -session. Okay. Since we're going to use the actual session, we're going to use that to override that method in here. Okay, so that's how you should do it. Now next, we're going to load this or assign this to variable up. Okay, so that's the starting point. Now that we load our Express all the package. The next thing we need to do is we need to, of course, prepare the test listening port. Let us start. So to do that, we need to declare cons port. So from here, we're going to call the process .env .port, or I want to load that to port, let's say 3000. And from here, I'm going to app listen. And go to call the port. Okay, this one should be port. Then going to okay, from here we need to load that or activate that in our to load out the session. The server port. This server is running at port so should do. Okay. Now, for this demonstration, I'll be using NodeMon, but since I don't want to install that, I just call it using npx. So to do that, you need to type npx and NodeMon server. And there you go. So now it's working. So I need to space this one here. Okay, cool. For those who are first time of using NodeMon, NodeMon is a type of package that, let's say, whenever you do something, instead of doing it manually, NodeMon will serve as the auto refresh of every changes you make. So that's the purpose of NodeMon. So let's continue. Now, the first thing we need to consider is going to create since I'll be only focusing on the session, so that the first thing we need to do is we need to set up our MySQL. So because MySQL will be our storage for every session that we're going to create. So to do that, let's say I want to start with the options, and these are the attributes that we need. So from here, let's say the host. So I'll be using localhost. For the port, I'll be using 3306 as the default port. And our user is our first, the root. Password, I'll be using my password. That is 1 2 3 4 5. And the database, of course, we need to use our database, the one that I demonstrated a while ago. That database name is DB session. So that's the name of my database. So DB session. Okay, cool. Now that we have our let's move this on here. Okay. Now that we set up our options or the configuration, next thing we need to do is we need to call that in a session connection. I'm going to assign that in a session connection. And I'm going to apply the MySQL create connection. and we're going to apply that option. Okay, cool. Okay, now that we have applied or set up our connection to MySQL, next thing we need to do is to apply the session store. So from here, going to call var session store equals to new MySQL store. Okay, so MySQL store is the one I declare here. That should be it. Then from here, say, okay, going to set our expiration. From here, going to set 1 0 8 1 2 3 4 5. Okay. Okay, that's for the expiration. And for setup, we need to auto-create the database table. So of course, we require the table, so we need to set it true. And our schema for the table, so I'll be using, so for this table, going to call that as session TBL, or other known as our session table. Of course, next, going to apply the columns. So for the columns, we'll be needing as session ID. Okay, that's the default of the express-mysql. So from here, first I'll be using this one as well, session ID. Then expires. Okay, I'll retain the expires. That should be a problem. And the data, same goes. I'll be using the data. Okay, so next, let's check very well. Okay, I think that should be it. The last one we need to, of course, okay, let's say I'm going to copy this one here, then going to initialize there. Okay, good. So now that we completed our session store for MySQL, next thing we need to do now is we need to apply the app use, or we're going to assign our session information. So to do that, we need to apply app.use. Okay, so from here, this one. Okay, so from here we're going to apply session and the session information. So that the requirements for the session is we need to have the key. So for the key, let's say we're going to assign that as key in. For the secret, you can assign any secret, but for now, just put it as my secret. Okay. Then next, I need to apply the store. So from here, going to apply the session store. That's the one we applied a while ago. And of course, we need to assign the receive. I'm going to set up to false. And last, we need to save uninitialize to true. So let's save that. Let's make it bigger. There you go. Okay. Now let's check if this one already execute. So from that, we need to check our database. Okay, so it seems not yet. So from this point here, so this is the first setup that we need. So let's go back again. Okay, after we set up our declaration, this section here, we apply the configuration for the MySQL, or to grab that information for the settings. Then from there, we apply or create a session store which contain this MySQL store. So this MySQL store is the reference of the express-mysql-session. Also, we assign a temporary table which is the session TBL with the following columns: session ID, expires, and data. And lastly, we create a setup for the session. So this is our session setup. Oops. Okay, so that's the secret information when we assign a session. So this will serve as the key or the token for this one. Okay, so that's the first part. Now that we have set up our first information, the next thing we need to do is we need now to demonstrate on how does really session works. Just to let you know that I won't be using database for this one, although we already create the database for the session, but on the other part, I won't be using any sample saving information. What I'm going to do here is we're just creating a dummy information. So just a dummy. So let's say I'm going to create a login account. So to do that, I'll be creating a dummy account or a temporary account. So I'm going to call that cons. And the name is, or the data that will support that, I'm going to assign as user data. And from here, I'm going to apply the following. So full name. So yours truly. Username. So let's say this is my username. Password. Let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, good. Okay, so what's the big deal for this one? Okay, since I won't be using a table, I'll be using a temporary data that will serve as our data information. So let's continue. Now, the very essence of this demonstration is we need to demonstrate on the procedure of logging in or login to a certain website. So to do that, let's say in a website, I'm going to use this information. So let's say I'm going to log in a command in a URL. So let's say we're going to call that as login. Okay. So from here, I'm going to create a function for that. So for the function, so I'm going to assign request. Okay. So from here, going to receive a request. Of course, from the request, I'm going to assign a const variable, and from the request, this should be received from the request body. Okay. What I mean is, once we do a request, this will pass on to the request body, and from that body, I'll be extracting these variables. These are the username and the password. Okay, so after receiving the request, I'm going to make a conditions for this one. So let's say if username is not equal to user data dot username. So take note, this user data is the one that I create up here. Okay, so that's the condition. If username is not equal to user data username, or password is not equal to user data dot password. Okay, so if this, of course, if this detects that mismatch or not found, we're going to return a JSON. Return rest dot status. Okay, going to return an invalid statement. Let's say return rest dot status for 1, and going to assign that the JSON format. And from here, going to let's say going to assign an error. Oops. Let's say error. Oops. Error space. Going to assign by true. Then the message. So we need to forward the message in return. My message is username or password is invalid. Okay, so else, going to apply an else statement here. Else, then this required that session. Okay, so this is how you use session. So in my case, I'm going to return if the results are correct, I'm going to return a session of this information. So from this point here, you can assign any variable. So let's say in my case, I'm going to return as the user info. Then from here, I'm going to return the user data. Oops, user data. And I'm going to return the full name. And I'm going to return the status for that one. Let's say you're going to land as landing success. Okay, so there's no error. Okay, good. Okay, so what it does is we're going to apply a login session. So from here, once we receive from the body, this will, of course, we're going to make some comparison if the data that I have and the inputs from the required body or the incoming status are not met, this information will return. But if so, this will save in a session parameter here with a variable of user info. Then that info will capture here. Okay. So, but before that, since this is the landing page for the login, so what will happen if we to know if this one is success or not? So to do that, I'll be prepared the index page for that. So, which means by default, this is the IP or the URL. Okay, so this is the URL in the page. So by default, once they see this page, I'm going to create a function here. So let's say rec or res. Okay. This will serve as our index page. So whatever status, whether it is a login or already logged or not, this initial page will display those information. So for this default, let's say I'm going to get here the session. So I'm going to call rec.session. And of course, since I use user info, so if this one has the information, then I'm going to return a response, res send. Let's say hello. Okay, just copy this one here. Then welcome. Okay, so if this one is occupied or already filled, this information will display. And of course, if not, going to create, so if not, going to return the information, let's say res send with the status of not logged in, or should I say not, I think that's it. Okay, so not login. So that's the default status. So from here, if the default is no information or there's no session during this time, this information will be displayed. So let's start. Okay, for this demonstration, I'll be using Thunder Client. For those who are first time of using Thunder Client, to install that, you need to go to the extension package here. Then look for Thunder Client. This one. Just take note this logo. So make sure you install this Thunder Client. Okay, Thunder Client is you can say that this is the counterpart or the same concept of Postman. And it's a good tools in VS Code. One of the good tools you can consider. Okay, so let's use this Thunder Client. So from here, let's say going to make a new request. So for the port, okay, let's try by calling our server, which is https://localhost 3000. when I hit send. Oops, connection at open. Let's check oh, this should be HTTP. So let's try again. There you go. Okay, so this is why we need to, this is how a demonstration on what session does. So going back to our code, as you can see, this variable here did not support or occupy the information yet. So for that to work, we'll be running our login command here to fill out this session here. So let's start. So we're going to call this login. So from here, I'm going to make another request. I'm going to copy this one here. Then I'm going to call this as login, just to make sure. /login. Okay. So from here, we need to supply the requirements. So the requirements is, first, we need a JSON format. So I'll be using, of course, the variable needed here is the username. So let's say wiki password. Let's say 1, 2, 3. Okay. So I'm going to intentionally send a wrong command or a wrong information. So if I send this one, okay, access denied for users. Okay. Missing password, no. Okay. So we have a database problem here. So let's check our database. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Password. Okay, let's review our errors again. Access denied. Password no. User root. Password should be a string. So try to replace this as string. Make sure you know your password. So definitely this should be a string. Because I have an issue here is access denied from our database. So let's go back. From here, going to login again. Okay, so there's another error. Access denied for user. No password. Okay, let's check. DB session, localhost 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Session DB expires my secret. Okay, let's try this once more. Just to make sure that I have the correct credentials here, I'm going to log in once more for this account. Oops. I need to log out. So let's say here. Password 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh yeah, it's correct. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So let's check our error. Access denied for user localhost. Cause port user root password 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Database session. Okay, I'll be paused for a while. while checking the database. So I'll get back. Okay, so I found the problem. So from this point here, I notice I forgot I set up this one here, which should not be the one. What we need is this one here, the session connection. So I'm going to replace that in here. Okay, so after replacing, oops, I need to check another error here. So make sure we copy the right word. Okay, so yeah, so I suppose this one is correct now. So take note, just replace the session that I assigned a while ago, because what I noticed is I just assigned this one within itself. So let's try this once more. So save this one. Okay, so no errors. So let's try. Okay, so from here, let's log in again. So I'm going to send the request. Okay, there you go. Okay, so our error is cannot destructive property username within the request body. Okay, so this happened because we sent an invalid request. So to fix that, since we're using a JSON to receive the request, we need to create that or convert the information to JSON so that once received that JSON format, it will be recognized by our Node.js server. So to do that, let's say from here, I'll be assign the response for that. Let's say express dot JSON. Okay, that's the first part. Express JSON. Next, going to of course use the express dot URL encoded. Okay, then from there, need to assign the extended to true. Okay, so that should be it. So what it does is this will interpret our incoming request as a JSON format. Okay, so let's try. So let's go back here. Then we hit send. Okay, so there's another here. This is the token position 18. So let's check our internal problem here. Unexpected token in JSON position 18. So parse. So let's check our inputs. Oh yeah, so here. Okay, this should be like this. Okay. In creating a JSON, if it is a number, you can omit the double quotation. If you start it with double quotation, it must be consistent with the other inputs. Okay, so if let's say you put here single quote, it should be applied to all. So since this is a double quotation, so hopefully this works. But if it is a number, I suppose this should be the correct format if it is a plain number. So let's try. There you go. So at this point here, so as you can see, we receive an invalid request. So which means this information is working now. I mean this one, the one that we applied. Now, since we have an invalid request because my original information is Ricky and this is the password. So let's replace that. So from here, going to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then going to send requests again. There you go. Now, at this point here, our request is working. So let's go back to our main page. This is our main page. So if I hit send, there you go. Hello. Okay, my name. Okay, so let me fix that one so that it's a little clear. Okay, so let's go back in here again. There you go. Okay, so this is how session works. Now that now that this section here is working, so let's check now our backend. Because a while ago, we assigned this information to store to this database, DB session, with a table of session people. So let's go back to our database. So from here, going to go back from here, DB session. And this is our table, session TBL. Okay, so I hope you can see this all. And there you go. Okay. Okay. So this is the session table that we set up in our server. So this is how it works. So what it does is using your actual section or session, the information will store on this table using this package called express-mysql-session. So now, as you can see, once we log in, this successfully logged the information. Hopefully, I can view this very well. Let's see here. Okay, so this is the content. As you can see, this is the session ID, and this is the expire time, and our data. Okay, so this is our data. So as you can see, my information, user info assigned to, I assign as my full name. So because a while ago when I create the login session, notice that I assign that to this variable here. So every session will trigger our database. Okay, so that makes sense? Good. So now that we successfully create our login session, now how does our session end? So for that to work, in every session, there's always a termination. Let's say if you close the page or you simply close or log out, that will close the session. So to do that, let's create a temporary request, and we're going to call that as just simply as logout. So what it does is we're going to perform a request that will terminate the session. So to do that, I'm going to assign here app.use Okay. From here, I'm going to assign logout. Logout. Function. Rec address. So let's say going to apply the request session. Then from here, I'm going to destroy that session. Let's say function and error. Okay. So from here, I'm going to call if there's an error or no error. If there's no error, so I'm going to return a result or response with this information. Logout. Yeah, just simply logout. Okay, so what it does is once we execute this logout request, this will destroy our session information or this current session activity. So to do that, let's go back here. So this one is login. So I'm going to create a new request. And I'm going to copy this one here and apply here. This time I'm going to call this as logout. Okay, let's try. I'm going to move here. So if I send this request, there you go. Now what happened? From this point here, we assign the command destroy. So here. So which means the current session will be terminated. So if I check our database, go back here. There you go. Okay. From this point here, automatically the information from our table will be removed. So that's okay. So that's the function of our session destroy. Okay, cool. So that's it, guys. So let's go back again from the top. Okay. What we do today is we create a temporary session that applies a test login using a dummy account. So this is my dummy account. And we perform the initial connection, which is store our information of the session to be saved on our database. And our database is called DB session. And with this information here. So please take note, this is the default columns of the session. You can simply change that on your preference, so it doesn't matter. As long you keep this one here, it will just override. And also, since we're using session, we're assigning our secret information. So this will be the one who holds the key for that session. And from the section here, we perform the login information, which we use to log in, just to explain to you that how session works. And the key point here is we assign that with this request. Okay, so this is the trigger point of the session. Also, we apply the logout statement that will destroy our current session. So this is the session here. And we also use this index information or the main URL to display if the information is login or logout. Okay, let's go back to this part here. A while ago, since we already logged out, you see this, since we already performed the last logout, so from our main page, this will be the information. See the point? Okay. It's simply because there were no sessions anymore. So from this point here, it didn't detect for any sessions. So what it display now is this not login information. And for the last one is we use standard client. This one. Okay. And for the last one, we use standard client to be served as our temporary request. Since we're not using any types of form, standard client will do the substitute of sending the request. Okay? So that's it, guys. If you found this video informative, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. And see you guys in the next video series. Cheers!